Have you ever had that strange, unsettling feeling in your life, not just for a moment, but of being stuck in a repeating loop?
Oh, yeah.
It's that deep frustration when you start a new job, thrilled by the clean slate, only to realize 6 months in that your new boss is the emotional twin of the last one.
Right. Or maybe you hit a certain financial milestone, you've earned more money than ever before, yet you watch your bank balance just flatline within weeks, no matter how hard you work.
Exactly. And often, I think the most painful scenario is in relationships. You swear off a certain kind of toxic partner, you feel you've learned your lesson, only to find yourself dating their emotional successor.
Someone who embodies the exact same landscape of unavailability or, emotional drama you just escaped. It's maddening.
It is, and it leads to this ultimate and often terrifying realization that in all these repeating dramas across every domain of your life, money, career, health, relationships, the one constant
The only variable that remains the same?
is you. You are holding the script, not just reading the lines.
That realization, once you allow it in, is both terrifying because it demands accountability and, well, profoundly liberating because it implies agency.
Right.
It forces you to ask the core question this whole deep dive is built on. What if reality is less like an unchangeable objective wall we're constantly bumping up against and more like a high-definition mirror?
Now, I have to stop you there because for many listeners, that idea that my inner world perfectly dictates my external reality, that can sound like, well, elegant victim blaming.
It's a critical point.
If I'm struggling financially or dealing with a chronic illness, are you really suggesting that I wish that upon myself? We have to address the nuance of this right out of the gate.
And that's a fantastic point to bring up, and the answer is absolutely no, not in the conscious wishing sense.
Yeah.
We are not talking about some fringe mystical concept where you just think happy thoughts and poof, you win the lottery.
Okay.
We are talking about the central operating system that governs this whole phenomenon, the law of correspondence.
As above, so below.
Precisely. That phrase, as above, so below, summarized so anciently, describes a mechanism, not a punishment. It means that the world out there, the one you interact with every day, is in constant, dynamic, subconscious dialogue with the world in here.
My thoughts, my beliefs.
Your core beliefs, your deep-seated emotional set points, and all of your unexamined traumas. All of it.
So my internal frequency, if it's set to scarcity or suspicion, it's like it broadcasts a signal. And the world, the external reality, just picks up the corresponding station, whether I'm consciously aware of the dial setting or not.
That's it. And our mission for this deep dive is to act as inner detectives. We want to synthesize these principles into a practical, step-by-step framework that allows you to identify and trace those repeating external results back to the subconscious belief that produced them.
So we're going to look at the science, the stories, and most importantly, the practical tools for rewriting that programming.
Exactly, so that it serves your highest aims rather than silently sabotaging them.
Let's start with where this concept even came from. It's clear from the history we looked at that this idea, the inner world shaping the outer world, it's anything but new. Long before we had modern psychology, ancient sages observed this startling consistency between the seen and the unseen.
It really has. It has echoed through cultures for millennia. It's a universal truth that just keeps getting rediscovered.
So where's the first clear articulation of it?
Well, we can trace its clearest articulation back to the Hermetic tradition, specifically in this cryptic, really foundational text known as the Emerald Tablet.
Yeah.
That is where we find that immortal line. That which is above is like unto that which is below, and that which is below is like unto that which is above.
It's the microcosm reflecting the macrocosm, the idea that the structure of the smallest part of existence is a mirror of the largest.
Absolutely. And this isn't confined to, esoteric texts. Centuries later, we see Jesus of Nazareth framing the very same principle when he says, "The kingdom of God is within you."
Right. The implication being that the fundamental nature of reality, order, peace, structure is something you discover internally first.
And that internal discovery then colors your perception of the external world. It was also present in Eastern philosophy, too. Hindu philosophy talks about the inner space, or Chitakasha, mirroring the outer space, Mahakasha.
It's everywhere once you start looking.
It is. Even Buddhism teaches that the mind projects its own universe, almost like a film reel onto a blank screen. The consistency across time proves that humans, across all kinds of geography, intuitively grasp that there is an intimate, causative link between their mental universe and the physical one they inhabit.
But again, for listeners today, this can still sound abstract. So let's anchor this deeply in hard science.
Yeah.
Because the real practical framework for why these patterns repeat starts inside our own heads, with our physical brains.
It starts with the brain's filtering system and the incredible amount of data it handles. I mean, think about the sheer volume of sensory information coming in every second.
It's massive.
Roughly 11 million bits of data bombard your senses.
Right.
But your conscious, thinking mind, it can only process a minuscule fraction of that, about 40 to 50 bits.
Right.
If we didn't have a massive, immediate, and utterly effective filter, we would be in a state of constant, debilitating sensory overload.
So the brain has to decide, without our conscious input, what's relevant and what's just irrelevant noise.
Exactly. And the primary mechanism for this selection is a powerful structure called the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
The RAS.
It's a network of neurons running through the brainstem, and the RAS decides what is relevant based entirely on your existing beliefs, your emotional preoccupations, and your goals. It actively scans the environment for information that matches your inner state and flags it for conscious attention.
We mentioned the classic red car example before.
Yeah.
If I decide I want to buy a red car, all of a sudden I see red cars everywhere.
Exactly.
They were always there, but my RAS has now tagged red car as important, making every single one visible to me.
Now, apply that same mechanism to a core belief. If you carry a deep-seated belief, maybe one you absorbed in childhood, that opportunities are scarce or people will eventually let me down, your RAS takes that as a prime instruction.
Like a command.
A direct command. It will relentlessly spotlight every single piece of evidence that seems to confirm your belief. The one email that was curt, the one job application that failed, the one friend who was late.
And at the same time, it just filters out all the contradicting evidence, the kindness, the opportunities.
Precisely. 1,000 acts of kindness or potential opportunities might unfold right in front of you, but they remain invisible because your brain is efficiently striving for neurological consistency.
So your perceived reality becomes the visible evidence that confirms your internal bias. This is confirmation bias, but it's more than that.
It is. When viewed through the law of correspondence, we see that loop expanding from mere perception into actual manifestation.
So not only do I notice the confirming information, but the law suggests I eventually attract or even create circumstances that mirror those beliefs through my external actions.
That's the key jump. Thoughts and emotions are not idle vapors. They are electromagnetic impulses influencing your posture, the openness or guardedness of your body language, your tone of voice, your micro-expressions.
And it is through those channels that you unconsciously dictate every interaction you have.
That's the feedback loop. This brings us back to that relationship between repetitive thought and crystallized belief.
Yeah, a single thought is fleeting, but when you think the same thought over and over.
Especially when it is charged with feeling, it hardens into a belief. Neuroscientist Donald Hebb's concept is foundational here. Neurons that fire together wire together. The repeated firing of that pathway literally strengthens it.
And the deeper implication there, the one we don't always talk about, is the biological efficiency of those pathways.
Exactly. That pathway doesn't just get stronger, it becomes insulated through a process called myelination. Myelin is this fatty white substance that wraps around nerve fibers, acting like the plastic coating on an electrical wire.
Okay.
When a thought pathway is myelinated, which happens through repetition, the signal travels significantly faster, up to 100 times faster.
So an old practiced belief like I'm not worthy of success travels instantaneously and automatically. It's the default superhighway.
It is the automatic programming, and that's what we see playing out in real time, like in the anecdote about Jack, who carried the belief, I am not respected.
Jack is a perfect and painful illustration of this feedback loop in action.
Because he held that internal conviction, that deep myelinated belief, his outer conduct mirrored it perfectly. When he entered a staff meeting, his body language was already guarded.
He wasn't consciously trying to be distant.
Not at all. His nervous system was already broadcasting defensiveness. He would lean back, arms folded tightly, offering curt, critical remarks only when absolutely necessary, often with a subtle tone of suspicion.
And his colleagues, reading that powerful nonverbal signal, the closed posture, the defensive tone, they responded unconsciously in kind.
They did. They started talking over him. They hesitated to share sensitive information with him. They ignored his points because they perceived his defensiveness as hostility or disengagement.
So from Jack's point of view, he was being disrespected. His behavior was a justifiable reaction to external cruelty.
Exactly. But the pattern detective sees that his inner conviction drove his outer conduct, which elicited the very disrespectful feedback that kept the conviction alive. The correspondence was flawless.
That's the terrifying part.
Yeah.
The universe isn't punishing or rewarding. It's simply reflecting.
And we must underscore that the thought must be emotionally charged to have this power.
Right, the feeling is the fuel.
Absolutely. A logical thought is neutral. But when you couple a thought with a high emotional chart, fear, resentment, shame, or deep conviction, that creates a powerful electromagnetic signature. The universe reads the emotional subtitle, not just the logical words you might be affirming.
I can share a deeper dive into my own personal financial example, which illustrates this point about emotional subtitles perfectly.
Please do, because it's such a relatable struggle.
So early in my career, I spent years holding this subtle but persistent conviction. It wasn't conscious, I wasn't thinking it, but I carried an emotional charge that financial success would somehow make me arrogant.
Or less authentic.
Yes, exactly. I had internalized the script of poverty as virtue from observing relatives who were highly critical of wealthy people when I was young. So intellectually, I wanted success, but emotionally, I feared the identity change it would require.
So what did that emotional subtitle, that subtle fear of becoming bad, manifest as?
It created persistent financial self-sabotage. I worked harder than anyone I knew, delivered immense value, yet my bank account just limped along at this low baseline.
Okay.
Deals I closed would inexplicably fall through at the last minute. Payments I was owed would be delayed for months. Unexpected expenses, a major appliance dying, a sudden tax bill appeared like clockwork, right when the balance looked healthy.
And this pattern was your internal system ensuring your material reality matched that deep-seated subtle conviction that being wealthy was dangerous or morally wrong. It was protecting your identity.
Exactly. The shift only occurred when I exposed the script's emotional origin and really rewrote it, changing the subtitle from wealth equals arrogance to something like, my abundance empowers me to serve.
And once the emotional tension was released,
The opportunities unfurled almost effortlessly. The external mirror caught up instantly.
and that just underscores the delicate truth. If the reflection feels harsh, it's not because life is cruel, but because we are holding judgments, fears, or unexamined beliefs that demand our attention.
That brings us straight to the origin story of most of these powerful emotional beliefs.
Yes.
Childhood.
Yes.
If the law of correspondence is always on, then those early years, the time before we had critical thinking, were not just formative, they were definitive. We call this the wet cement phase.
It is the most critical period because it's when the foundational operating system of your reality is installed. From birth to roughly age 7, a child's brain spends an overwhelming amount of time in the theta frequency range,
Which is the same state as hypnosis.
the same brain state adults enter during deep meditation or hypnosis. So we were tiny hypnotic sponges, just receiving our programming straight from the environment without any critical filters.
Right, so we weren't just absorbing spoken words. We were absorbing commands embedded in our parents' moods, their gestures.
Their contradictory actions, and the family's ambient emotional climate regarding safety, money, and love. The parent doesn't need to lecture. The child is learning everything by observation and absorption.
That famous impossible command, do as I say, not as I do, never works.
Never. Because the child's subconscious prioritizes the lived experience, the tension in the parent's shoulders, the sigh when the phone rings, the contradictory actions over the spoken instruction.
And this is exactly where the invisible scripts are created.
Exactly. We define invisible scripts as the silent instructions, or the lines of code, that are running continuously in the background of your mind. They are so insidious because they feel like raw, objective reality rather than an interpretation we adopted decades ago.
You can often hear these scripts stitched into everyday language that sounds like common sense, but is in fact a limiting belief.
We hear them everywhere. Cultural examples that stifle potential. Money doesn't grow on trees, reinforcing scarcity.
Nice guys finish last.
Yeah, cementing cynicism as necessary for success, or you have to suffer for beauty, implying pain is mandatory for worthiness.
But the deeper, more personalized ones are often formed by a single moment of emotional intensity in that wet cement phase, like the story of Max the nephew.
Max's father was a typically calm person, but under intense stress, when his car stalled on the freeway, he lashed out. He didn't yell at Max, but he fumed, muttering, "Nothing ever works out when you need it to."
And Max, just sitting there in his theta state, absorbs that sentence as a universal law.
It sank right in. And what did that lifelong expectation lead to in Max's adult reality? It became a chronic procrastination pattern,
So he would delay important projects.
subconsciously expecting a breakdown, a flaw, or failure. By procrastinating and missing deadlines, he actively created the very failures he feared, thereby constantly validating his father's emotional decree. Nothing ever works out when you need it to.
The adult behavior was simply the correspondence to that single, overheard, emotionally charged phrase.
Exactly. And the invisible script around performance and self-worth is perhaps the most widespread sabotage mechanism we see in high achievers.
Oh, absolutely.
Consider the anecdote of the man who grew up receiving attention and praise only when he delivered perfect grades or won trophies. The covert emotional message he internalized was chillingly clear. Love equals perfect performance.
This sounds like a recipe for a successful career on the outside.
It is the picture of outer success, but at the cost of the inner self. That script translated into dizzying adult dedication, 18-hour workdays, a corner office, a sparkling resume, but delivered with perpetual exhaustion and a lack of peace.
And when you ask someone running that script what they fear would happen if they simply stopped over-delivering,
The answer is often raw. I'd disappear. The adult behavior is an attempt to ensure survival based on a childhood formula. They are protecting themselves from disappearance.
and sometimes these scripts are installed through simple, accidental comparison in the family unit, as demonstrated by the case study of the twins, Maya and Lena. I think this story highlights how proximity doesn't guarantee the same blueprint.
It's one of the most poignant examples of how different our realities can be, even when sharing the same house. Maya and Lena were raised in the same loving home.
But they had different experiences.
Very different. Maya won an art prize in 3rd grade, which solidified her script. When I express myself, I'm celebrated. Her self-expression led directly to validation.
Lena, who also entered, didn't place. And that wasn't the defining moment. The defining moment was overhearing a relative whisper later, Maya's the artist of the family.
That seemingly innocent, fleeting, perhaps unintended comment etched the script into Lena's young, theta state mind. My best will never be enough. Or, more specifically, my creative self will never be enough.
So Lena didn't stop striving, she just pivoted where she sought validation.
Exactly. She pursued corporate law, she chased the accolades and external measures of success, a field far removed from the artistic expression where she felt she had failed.
And she achieved tremendous external success.
But she struggled with severe anxiety and inner hollowness. The external achievements were an endless, exhausting attempt to disprove that lifelong script that her intrinsic worth was insufficient. This case study just powerfully proves how one comment, filtered through the sensitive lens of a child's emotional needs, can etch a lifelong script that dictates adult professional and emotional reality.
The truly empowering moment in this work is realizing that once we understand the blueprints and the scripts, we can start looking for their visible results. The invisible code leaves very visible footprints, and those are the repeating cycles we call patterns.
Patterns are our most accessible evidence. They are the layered repetitions that keep coming back, and they are not linear. They exist in layers, like a cake we have to peel back to find the root.
It's a detective job.
It really is. A good pattern detective knows how to move from the surface down to the core programming.
Let's define those 4 core layers.
At the very top, we have the top layer, circumstances. These are the external facts of repetition. You're consistently micromanaged in every job. The server always brings you the wrong order. You always attract partners who require deep emotional fixing.
It's what you complain about at dinner parties.
Exactly. Beneath that is the emotional clue. That's the middle layer. Emotional threads. These are the familiar feelings that accompany the events. The feeling of intense frustration, the specific strain of anxiety that precedes a certain deadline.
Or that familiar sinking feeling of loneliness.
Right, the recognizable emotional flavor of your repeating drama.
And when we dig deeper into the actual programming,
We find the core layer, core beliefs. These are the succinct, defining statements. I'm not important. Rest is a luxury. I must carry the weight alone. This layer is the direct translation of the invisible script.
and the deepest layer.
The deepest layer, the most powerful one, is the identity, the I am statement. The subconscious whispers, I am the overlooked one. I am the struggler. I am the victim of bad luck.
The pattern detective's job, then, is to trace the frustrating circumstances back through the emotional thread to the core belief, and ultimately to the identity you are unconsciously carrying.
And sometimes those patterns hide in the most mundane places, specifically in the language we use every day. Our vocabulary reveals the internal patterns we carry without us even noticing.
Language is definitely the easiest, fastest clue to spot, because it acts like predictive text for your reality.
If you frequently use phrases like, "it's always something," or "I never catch a break," you are not just describing reality. You are reinforcing a constant state of hassle. You are actively commanding the universe to bring you more scenarios that match the complaint.
We reviewed the example of Nora, the teacher, who tracked her linguistic patterns.
Nora discovered through her journaling that she used the phrase, "with my luck," in almost every paragraph she wrote. "With my luck, the copier will jam. With my luck, I'll get audited."
She was declaring her own fate.
Constantly. She was so deeply convinced her fate was inadequate or antagonistic that she was constantly verbalizing it. Once she saw in writing how often she declared her luck inadequate, the correspondence became undeniable. Her reality was simply obliging her conviction.
And changing that language was the first step to editing her life script.
It was. And patterns also love predictable cycles. They don't always appear randomly.
This is crucial to understand their origin. They love cycles.
They can appear annually, like that predictable bout of laryngitis right after the winter holidays, perhaps triggered by the feeling of being verbally powerless at a family gathering. Or they can be monthly, perhaps, around your financial cycles.
Or even daily, like a predictable wave of anxiety or loneliness that sets in right before sunset.
Exactly. The case of Peter, the software engineer, detailed the power of the weekly pattern.
He and his wife always argued on Sunday evenings.
It was a guaranteed tension point. They would dread Sundays, not knowing why, just accepting it as part of their marriage. When he traced the emotional thread back, he found it corresponded perfectly to his childhood dread of Monday mornings.
His father was an alcoholic.
Yes, and Sunday evenings were always tense and irritable before his father went to work. So Peter was subconsciously recreating that dread in his adult household, even though the external stressors were completely different. The nervous system doesn't know the difference.
He was recreating the feeling of Sunday evening tension.
Exactly. Once he recognized the emotional echo and replaced the argument with a new, calming Sunday evening ritual, a long walk, a structured planning session, the pattern dissolved.
That leads us to the hardest realization when working with patterns. The subconscious prefers known dangers over unknown possibilities. This is the root of pattern blindness, the myth of bad luck.
The subconscious prioritizes predictability, even if that predictability involves pain. It feels safer because it's familiar. This is why people jump from one unhealthy relationship straight into another. The toxicity feels strangely familiar.
It matches the childhood template of how love must feel.
It does. And the goal of this deep dive is to gently guide the nervous system to equate calm, healthy consistency with safety, rather than equating chaos and extremes with familiarity.
The videographer Ethan and his feast or famine cycle showed this perfectly in his financial life.
Ethan saw himself as an unpredictable freelancer, and his bank account mirrored it. When he earned a lot of money, he would spend recklessly, convinced the flow would stop any moment. When he was broke, he'd panic work until he restored the balance.
He saw it as industry unpredictability.
But the deeper pattern was that he felt safe only in the extremes, lavish or dire spending, because that matched the high-intensity, chaotic environment of his childhood.
Consistent financial health, the calm middle ground, was terrifyingly unfamiliar.
It was. It triggered a deep, primal panic because his nervous system had no template for calm safety. Once he recognized that the pattern was an emotional echo demanding chaos, he could work on cultivating inner calm and acceptance of stability. Only then did his financial consistency stabilize for the first time. Money is one of the clearest and most immediate mirrors the Law of Correspondence provides. It reflects our deepest, most specific assumptions about worth, possibility, and security.
And the most central of these correspondence concepts is the financial thermostat. It sounds almost too simple, but the mechanics are powerful.
The financial thermostat is your internal, subconsciously set income limit. It regulates exactly how much abundance, cash flow, and visibility you allow yourself to hold comfortably.
So if your internal baseline is set to, say, $50,000 a year, and you temporarily earn $70,000,
your subconscious activates its powerful air conditioning. The self-sabotage mechanisms kick in.
what does that look like?
That air conditioning can manifest as unexpected expenses, a sudden desire to invest in something risky, missed deadlines that cause loss of retainer, or simply overspending. It is all designed to return you quickly to the familiar, accepted baseline of $50,000.
This is not logical.
Not at all. It is a neurological imperative for consistency.
The case of Alex, who couldn't hold on to money, illustrates this imperative perfectly.
Alex simply could not keep money for more than 48 hours. He'd get paid, feel an intense, fleeting burst of relief, and immediately feel compelled to spend until he was back in the cycle of lack.
And this was traced to a childhood association.
Yes, where money was not seen as a tool for sustained stability, but rather as a fleeting victory, a quick release from the constant oppression of poverty. His nervous system demanded that instant gratification and release, leading him to spend immediately and reset the clock for the next stressful earnings cycle.
It seems like money is rarely about the dollars themselves. It's a mirror of inherited values, especially in our careers.
Absolutely. We often look at our careers through what we can call a funhouse mirror effect. We live from inherited values, prestige, the need for approval, the belief that real artists starve, or the idea that a boss must be cruel and demanding.
These are external, often fear-based markers.
Right. But when those inherited values diverge sharply from our core values, aliveness, genuine contribution, personal freedom, the career warps, causing stress and misalignment.
The software engineer Clara felt this divergence acutely when turning down promotions.
Clara was highly qualified and internally craved influence and leadership, yet she repeatedly turned down management roles. Her inner script, absorbed from years of hearing her mother describe bosses as heartless and disliked, was the silent saboteur. Her subconscious created a safety mechanism. Turning down leadership wasn't a lack of ambition, it was a protective strategy.
Protecting her from the danger of becoming the person her mother warned against.
Exactly. It equated leadership with being fundamentally disliked. And if you don't address the inner script, you eventually hit an invisible threshold, the inner glass ceiling.
And that ceiling is set entirely by your self-worth.
It determines the level of authority, visibility, and wealth you allow yourself to hold. If your inner threshold is low, you will unconsciously pump the brakes as you approach that ceiling, manifesting as imposter syndrome, chronic undercharging for your services, or, in the case of Raj, a physical manifestation.
Tell us about Raj, the immigrant entrepreneur.
Raj had a hugely successful catering business and was approaching major investor funding, a level of success that would have made him quite wealthy and highly visible. But each time he got close to signing the papers, he developed debilitating, near-blinding migraines.
And medical tests were inconclusive.
Right. The law of correspondence was enforcing an internal boundary. The migraines were his body enforcing his father's deeply ingrained mantra from their home country. Keep your head low, tall trees catch more wind.
For his father, visibility meant danger.
Visibility meant vulnerability and scrutiny, which equaled danger. The external wealth triggered that primal internal fear of danger, and the body's correspondence, the migraine, was the fastest way to pull him back to the safety below the visible threshold. The headaches stopped the meetings.
This whole concept provides a powerful counter-narrative to the pervasive cultural belief that aligning with your purpose requires financial sacrifice.
It fundamentally refutes the split between purpose and profit. The research suggests that when your work is truly aligned with your core values, your purpose actually increases prosperity because it channels authentic, high-frequency value into the world.
And prosperity, in turn, props up purpose.
It does, by providing the resources for greater impact and freedom, like Leah and her podcast.
Leah was a successful corporate trainer who feared launching a creative project like a podcast would cannibalize her stable training income. She carried the script that creativity equals instability.
But after she cleared that limiting belief, she launched the podcast, and instead of losing clients,
The podcast served as a magnetic portfolio.
exactly. It attracted 2 new, extremely high-paying clients who wanted customized workshops based on the content of the podcast. It doubled her revenue, proving that her expanded service and authentic expression were rewarded, not penalized, by the law of correspondence. We shift now from the external mirrors of money and career to the most intimate areas of correspondence: the body and the heart. The body is the most honest, immediate, and accurate mirror you own.
It reflects beliefs, emotions, and unspoken trauma with exquisite precision.
And the science behind this is rapidly catching up to the ancient philosophy. We're talking about fields like psychoneuroimmunology.
It's a revolutionary field because it maps the communication pathways between the mind, the nervous system, and the immune system.
It reveals that thoughts, nerves, and immune cells are constantly dancing together. The body is always listening to the internal monologue.
So chronic resentment may inflame joints, unspoken grief may congest the lungs, and perpetual hurry can strain the heart.
Precisely. The sources detail the biological mechanism. Stress hormones, particularly cortisol, act as the communication messengers. When you live in a constant state of internal criticism or fear carrying a belief like, I must be perfect to survive, your nervous system signals danger,
This chronic, low-grade stress floods the body with cortisol.
which over time suppresses immune function and creates inflammatory responses in predictable bodily neighborhoods. That's why medical students' immune function often plummets during high-stress exam week.
And the newer field of epigenetics confirms that our beliefs and lifestyle aren't just affecting our stress levels, they're influencing our actual genetic expression.
This is a massive shift from the deterministic view of genetics. Genes are responsive piano keys, not immutable fate.
Right.
Dr. Dean Ornish's study on men with prostate cancer is a prime example. The men were able to switch off oncogenes, cancer-promoting genes, and activate protective genes through comprehensive lifestyle changes.
That included meditation, diet, and stress reduction.
Exactly. The body's hardware, the DNA remained, but the software, the beliefs, and emotional environment dictated its performance.
This links directly to emotional topography, that feelings land in predictable bodily neighborhoods based on their function.
They absolutely do. Unprocessed emotions become trapped energy. Chronic fear tenses the psoas muscle, the body's primary fear muscle. Unexpressed, chronic resentment often inflames joints, making movement stiff.
This is why the case of Serena, the marathon runner, is so revealing. Her knees mysteriously gave out before every major race.
Despite perfect medical clearance, her body was speaking when her mind resisted. Serena was wrestling with deep, unspoken resistance to moving forward in her marriage, which she knew was toxic but felt unable to leave.
So her subconscious resistance manifested physically.
Right, targeting the mechanism of forward motion. Her knees. Her body forced the rest and self-inquiry her mind was consciously resisting. The symptom corresponded exactly to the internal conflict.
And if the body is a personal mirror, the relationship arena is the most intensely polished stage for correspondence.
It really is. It mirrors your deepest, most hidden beliefs about deserving love and safety.
Romantic connection is where every unexamined attachment wound plays out.
And relationships are governed by invisible contracts, unspoken deals forged to meet unfulfilled childhood needs. We agree to play roles, often based on childhood dynamics, which guarantee familiar, if unhealthy, outcomes.
Like the relationship between Claire and her husband Dylan.
Claire and Dylan had an unconscious contract. Claire served as Dylan's unpaid emotional therapist, constantly validating his feelings and solving his problems, and in return, she felt a sense of purpose.
But when Claire eventually set a boundary, refusing to be his sole counselor because she was exhausted.
Dylan felt profoundly betrayed.
Why betrayal? She was just protecting herself.
Because the contract had been shattered, his inner belief was, if I am needy, she will serve me. Her inner belief was, I will play small so you feel important and you will protect me. When she stopped serving, his side of the contract felt violated. The conflict wasn't about the boundary itself, it was a direct reflection of that shattered, unconscious inner contract.
You also point out that the immediate electric chemistry we feel with a new partner often arises from shared unresolved wounds, not necessarily true compatibility.
That initial sizzle is often the nervous system mislabeling the relief of recognizing a familiar wounded pattern as passion. It's an immediate recognition of a shared attachment style or an unresolved emotional dance.
Such as the case of Noor and Lucas.
Their initial intensity was intoxicating. It came from shared, guarded intimacy and independent pride. They both valued space and avoiding vulnerability. But 6 months later, this dynamic devolved into painful cycles of distance, projection, and acute neediness.
They were engaging in a shared dance.
A shared dance of closeness then distance that perfectly mirrored their respective attachment wounds. They matched their trauma, not their true, healthy capacity for intimacy.
Ultimately, all relationship correspondence traces back to the compass of self-worth.
Your level of self-worth acts as the internal magnet. If you internalize criticism, you unconsciously attract partners who will confirm that critique. Lena, for instance, internalized her mother's criticism, I'm lovable only if I look perfect.
And consequently, she attracted partners who weaponized humor about her appearance.
Yes, Adam and Ben. Her external reality shifted only when she updated her internal magnet to, my body deserves kindness and respect. That alignment immediately changed the frequency she broadcasted, leading her to a partner who reflected that new, higher value.
Once we've identified the scripts, traced the patterns, and felt the emotional charge, we transition to the mechanics of change. And the first internal obstacle we have to address is that persistent internal heckler, the inner critic.
The critic is central to correspondence because it is the voice that perpetuates the old pattern. We need to reframe its role.
So it's not an enemy.
Not at all. The critic's function, paradoxically, is always safety. It announces that something is fundamentally lacking, rooted in our evolutionary negativity bias. But its specific content, the language it uses, is supplied by those childhood scripts.
So it's a misguided protection mechanism built from old, outdated information.
Exactly. And the sources show the real, tangible price of chronic criticism: elevated cortisol, suppressed immune function, and crucially, direct sabotage of external reality.
Like the client who opened every sales quote with, "I know budgets are tight these days."
He was broadcasting low self-worth and desperation, and his client simply mirrored that internal belief by questioning his rates and squeezing his margins. We have to transform that critic from a tyrant into a source of feedback.
Before we can install new beliefs, though, we have to clear the field. And the tool for that is emotional alchemy, releasing the stored, unprocessed emotional charge.
Unprocessed trauma leaves living fossils in the nervous system trapped energy that constantly informs our present reality and warps the mirror. Alchemy is the process of safely transmuting that base emotional charge.
What are the specific steps for this process?
First, naming the unspoken. You have to articulate the feeling beyond the surface level, calling fatigue despair, or recognizing that stress is actually unexpressed anger.
Yep.
Second, using the breath as a crucible. The breath is the key to the nervous system, like Clara, who consciously used her exhale to release the stored energy of her father's demanding newspaper voice. Third, somatic release, allowing the body to move the trapped energy.
Like Sam, the car accident survivor.
Right. Sam used structured movement, pushing against the air, to release the trapped survival energy that his body was still holding decades later.
And central to this clearing process is forgiveness. But we must emphasize that this is a practical tool, not a sentimental gesture.
It is entirely practical. Resentment is the emotional glue that keeps the base metal of the wound intact. It forces you to continue living in the past event. Forgiveness is the heat required for transmutation. It frees you from carrying the weight and the vibrational signature of that past event.
It lightens your frequency so the mirror can finally reflect something new.
Exactly. Once the field is cleared, we use the powerful tools for conscious reprogramming. Let's start with visualization, which you emphasize is neurological training.
It's not just passive daydreaming.
No, it actively carves new neural pathways by mimicking reality. The key is sensory and emotional detail. You must vividly imagine the scene and feel the accompanying emotion, which powerfully stamps the new reality into your subconscious. The brain cannot distinguish between a highly detailed, emotionally resonant visualization and an actual memory.
Like the case of Amy and her team lead promotion.
Amy carried a deep belief that she was doomed to entry-level support roles. She visualized herself leading meetings, hearing the confident timbre of her voice, feeling the texture of the boardroom table, smelling the conference room coffee. She practiced the feeling of being respected and leading.
And 6 months later, the promotion materialized.
It did, because the internal blueprint had changed, and her RAS was now actively flagging and drawing in the opportunities that matched her new internal script.
And that visualization leads directly to mental rehearsal.
Mental rehearsal is the active practice of challenging scenarios until they feel ordinary. I use this myself when preparing to negotiate a large contract. I practiced asking for a high advance repeatedly until the dialogue felt boring and entirely normal.
So when the actual negotiation occurred,
My body executed the action automatically because it was a dress rehearsal, freeing my conscious mind to be calm, assertive, and strategic rather than fearful.
for consistency, we need habit coupling, integrating new beliefs into existing life flow.
This is crucial. You marry a new belief or practice to an established routine, attaching a gratitude practice to the action of clicking your seatbelt, or reciting an affirmation about self-worth while brushing your teeth.
This cleverly utilizes the brain's dopamine reward circuitry.
Exactly. You get a tiny hit of pleasure from the established routine to cement new neural grooves quickly, bypassing the need for constant, exhausting willpower.
And finally, writing as coding.
Writing is the ultimate act of crystallization. Using journals and scripting to write a letter to the future in the past tense is incredibly effective. For example, writing, "I can hardly believe it's next year, and we already finished this project with such ease,"
The subconscious reads those past tense words as completion.
as fact, and the external world begins to backfill the events that validate that completion.
Mastery isn't a destination, it's a dynamic state, and it requires radical consistency. The daily practice is what magnifies the change because As we now understand, myelinated neurons fire together.
The morning foundation is the essential starting point. Before checking your phone, before absorbing the world's external frequency, you have to tune into your own.
Acknowledge the residue of your dreams, assess your emotional climate.
And then pivot to intentionality. Drinking water while imagining light washing your cells clear of yesterday's stress, or simply rising slowly, sets the inner frequency for the entire day.
But life is chaotic, so we need tools for real-time recalibration when we get triggered, which leads us to micro-adjustments.
The 3-breath reset is the perfect antidote to daily chaos. When you feel a surge of stress or frustration, a colleague sends a curt email, traffic cuts you off, you engage the cycle. Pause. Sense.
What is the negative energy I am emitting? Is it fear, frustration, urgency?
Then choose. What energy do I want to emit instead? Calm, collaboration, abundance? And finally, embody. Saturate your posture, breath, and facial expression with the new choice.
I found this immensely helpful when dealing with that difficult phone call negotiation we discussed. The shift from panic to collaborative abundance was mirrored instantly by the external conversation.
That's the law of correspondence's immediacy in action. That 30-second inner realignment allowed you to propose a solution that satisfied both parties because you were operating from a frequency of collaboration rather than scarcity.
Of course, no matter how good your daily practice is, setbacks are inevitable, and we need to reframe them. They are not failure or punishment.
They are feedback, and they mirror deeper, unintegrated layers of belief that still need attention. Setbacks are often followed by a massive cortisol spike, which causes the brain to default immediately to the old, familiar, myelinated pathway speed and shame over thoughtful novelty.
Our job is to intercept that shame cycle immediately.
And this is where the conscious response cycle, the POAIC model, comes into play.
The POAC model.
The antidote to automatic reaction. When a setback occurs, you pause, giving yourself time to think. Then observe non-judgmentally. This is crucial. You observe the pattern without layering shame onto it. Then accept the present feeling without fighting it.
That stops the cortisol spike.
It does. Then you inquire. What is this telling me about an unintegrated belief? And finally, you choose an aligned action. This sequence prevents the brain from reverting to shame and restores your internal sovereignty.
The case of David, the software engineer, is a classic illustration of how setbacks reveal those deep, unintegrated layers, even after apparent success.
David had successfully broken his struggle for every dollar script and received a huge salary bump, but the pattern wasn't fully integrated into his identity. Shortly after the bump, his car mysteriously died, requiring a huge payout, and he maxed his credit card on an impulse purchase.
He manufactured a crisis.
A setback to restore the familiar strain and struggle he subconsciously associated with earning.
So the POAC cycle helped him see that the setback wasn't bad luck. It was feedback that his self-worth was still tied to struggle and financial strain.
He needed the strain to feel like himself.
Exactly. And the final, most advanced stage of this journey is shifting your identity from being a student using tools to an architect designing reality.
That is mastery. It relies on 3 constant pillars: awareness, continual noticing of inner dialogue and external feedback; alignment, making choices congruent with your highest values even when difficult; and action, physical follow-through that validates the new internal script.
It's about treating the entire day as a practice.
Like the IT manager Robbie, who treated every server ping as a mindfulness bell, forcing him back to the present moment and his intention. And finally, co-creation, understanding that we have to release the white-knuckle grip and cooperate with the collective flow.
You steer your personal vessel, but cooperate with the current.
It's a dance between radical intentionality and radical release. You are creating, but you must allow the universe to deliver the how. So we've synthesized the core truth. Every external event, from your physical health to the person you attract, is a postcard from your inner world. The law of correspondence is always operating, constantly photographing and reflecting what you carry inside.
You are not constrained by your past.
You are only constrained by your current unexamined beliefs.
The liberation that comes with that responsibility is immense. You have all the tools now to be the conscious author of your story, not just a reader reacting to a script written long ago.
And that path of the conscious creator demands a blend of humility and responsibility. Humility means recognizing you are one luminous thread in a vast tapestry. You don't control the whole ocean.
And responsibility.
Responsibility means acknowledging that your thread, your frequency, influences the entire pattern. So the provocative thought for you to carry into this week is, now that you know you are designing your reality, how will you use your new, consciously chosen beliefs to raise the vibration of the collective field this week?
That is an incredible question to end on. Remember, you don't need permission, a perfect past, or cosmic luck, just the decision to keep tending your inner garden. The world outside will bloom precisely to match it.